this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from Zyson. And Zyson asks why there is so much backbiting and backstabbing in the pagan community, and why there are so many problems between different traditions and so much of the attitude that my way is the right way and the only way, and so much, so much intolerance. And although he did not use the word, I will use the word, why is there so much proselytization in the community? And Zyson goes on to say that he fears that the pagan community is in danger of becoming segregated, as the Christian community already is, into denominations that are mutually exclusive and that condemn one another on a regular basis. And he would like my take on this. And my take on this is that the pagan community is not in danger of becoming segregated as the Christian community is. We were in danger of it about 20 years ago, but at this point it's basically happened. We are mostly segregated as the Christian community is. The question is, can we overcome it? It may not be quite as rigid as it is in the Christian community, but it's well on the way. And intolerance is certainly the attitude of the day. Backstabbing is very common, and proselytization is a huge problem in the pagan community. And you'll meet people who will tell you pagans don't proselytize. But this is probably the biggest lie in the community, and anyone who tells you pagans don't proselytize is lying. They may well be lying to themselves, but they are lying. And probably the single most proselytized community is the eclectic Wiccan community, who are being constantly proselytized by various other groups trying to tell them, oh no, you're wrong about this, you're wrong about that, you have to do it the way we do it, you have to belong to us, or various other things. And again, this is, I think, a real problem for the future. Can we overcome it? Well, I don't know if we can overcome it. I'm sure that some of the branches of paganism cannot overcome it, and we just have to assume that those are headed toward a mutually exclusive kind of isolation. Can the wider community overcome it? Well, the wider community changes frequently. It's certainly possible that tolerance could become the flag of the next day, even though intolerance is the flag of today. If we want to overcome it, we have to work to overcome it, and we have to focus on it. Now, to go to Zyson's actual question, why is this the case? I think there are a couple of things that are particularly at fault in this problem. I do consider it to be a fault in no uncertain terms. The first part is, I think that some of it is simply human nature. Any religion you look at, you'll see some of these things, but we do seem to be particularly virulent about it. And I think that the two main reasons, one is a lot of people come to paganism with wounded egos. And we have a number of tools for healing that, but a lot of people either never encounter those tools or don't use them. And as I very often say, I will say again, shadow work is extraordinarily important. When you have a wounded ego, you often act out of that woundology, and often in ways that are not necessarily in your own best interests, let alone the interests of your community, and often in ways that you're not consciously aware of. So doing shadow work would solve a lot of this problem, I think, because very often you'll find people who are doing the very thing that they claim they would never do, and proselytization, again, is the perfect example. A lot of people will say, oh, I would never proselytize, while they're proselytizing you. The second thing that is responsible for this problem is that a lot of people come to this religion because they're in rebellion against their previous religion, and they don't move out of that state. It's perfectly fine to come to the pagan family of religions because you're in rebellion against another religion, but once you're here, you kind of need to adopt this religion and stop worrying about the old one. But very often, people are still worried about their old religion, they're still defining themselves by their old religion, and they're defining themselves entirely in the negative. What they don't believe, what they don't want, what they don't do, and they never embrace what they do believe, or what they do want, or what they want to do. They keep it all in terms of reaction to that other religion, and this is a very negative behavior, and it leads to very negative consequences. One of the things you see is often people who are in that state of rebellion are accustomed to tearing everything around them down, because that's what they were doing in their old religion, because it was not their path. So they come to this path and they continue to tear everything down, and they never come to that point where they start to build things up. And what I would say is we have to find a way to help people come to the point that they stop tearing everything down and start building something up, or they'll never have anything but ashes. But that is where the wider pagan community seems mostly to be. And The third thing that I personally see as a problem is the so-called academic movement within the pagan community, which often makes issues out of things that really have nothing to do with the health and vitality of this community. They are not thinking of it as a movement, they're thinking of it as an abstract idea. And abstractions are all well and good, but when you're dealing with a living movement that is growing and expanding, you really need to not be thinking in terms of abstractions, but in terms of practicalities. And although there's certainly nothing wrong with having an academic movement, to put all the practicalities aside in favor of the abstractions is a bad thing. The other thing about the academic movement within paganism is that it really doesn't have a lot to do with academics, it has a lot more to do with politics, and which traditions you favor and which ones you don't, and finding ways to basically strike at the ones you don't like. And that isn't really what academics is about, but very often people who are flying the academic flag in the pagan world are doing exactly that. And again, they will misdirect attention from the things that really need to be dealt with to things that are basically irrelevant. What do we need to deal with in our community? Well, intolerance is the number one thing. Intolerance between the different religions within paganism, intolerance between the different traditions within those religions, and also racial intolerance is a big thing that we need to deal with. And many of the prominent organizations in our community are totally ignoring it. And I was horrified recently to learn that the Covenant of the Goddess had actually banned discussion of racial and social justice issues on their primary message list, and created a separate but equal list where people could go and discuss it in obscurity where no one needs see it. And I think that's an example of exactly what our community needs not to do. We need to bring these things into the open, we need to discuss them, and we need to fix them, or we must prepare to live with them, one or the other. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to live with it. And I think we've let a lot of opportunities go by as a community. I think we have largely let our window of opportunity to make major social changes close on us. And I'm not going to say it can't be reopened, but it certainly cannot be dealt with in the same way if it is reopened. Because in my opinion, the way that it was dealt with in this last 40-odd years was basically to focus on infighting rather than making real changes and real differences in the world. Our movement really could make a wonderful positive difference in the world. I feel that some branches of it still will, but a great deal of it has wasted its energy. So those are my thoughts on the matter. I'm not sure how helpful it is. If it were applied, I think it would be helpful, but that is something only time will tell. So, until next time, may you blessed be. Reverend Don, super omnibus of incantations and invocations for all occasions. Marianne Kay and I created this massive compendium of magic and artwork for you to use in any way that you would like. There are literally hundreds of spells and hundreds of illustrations, which can be mixed and matched and used in many different ways. Check it out now at witchghoulstore.com.